Thousands of dads have been denied access to their children for years, and some never make it through. They take their own lives. But you won't hear about it in the media. In fact, men get punished for even talking about it. That's why we're here to bring truth into the light. Today on The Man Show, we're joined by someone who's been documenting this silent crisis for years. John Stapleton is a veteran Australian journalist. He's written for the Sydney Morning Herald, The Australian, and covered courts, politics and culture for decades. But the stories that have haunted him most are the ones the public never sees. Stories of broken fathers, family court rulings that defy logic, and men who are punished simply for wanting to be with their kids. This interview isn't just information, it's evidence, and some of it is hard to hear. Well, welcome John. Thanks for joining us here on the YouTube channel, the podcast today. We're talking about men's challenges, men's issues, and as we know, men today are facing incredibly tough times on multiple fronts. There's always been challenges for men, we know that's true, but there are challenges going on today, especially around family and parenting and the pressures around that, related mental health, etc. It's a real struggle for a lot of men, and we really want to hear from you today from your insider's viewpoint. You spend a lot of time watching the court system, hearing stories, seeing the real brutal truth of what the journey is like for some men. And so we want to talk about some of those stories today. And so take us inside some of those stories, because we really want people watching this to know these stories are real.
I was a kind of progressive kind of bloke. I did women's studies at university in the 1970s and, you know, progressive kind of guy. And I think, like everybody, it was the whole family court system which shakes people up to the fact that this system is rotten to the core.
Yes.
It is incredibly socially damaging, does not have your interests at heart or the children's interests at heart, and that everybody involved is colluding, not just in a fiasco, but a scam, essentially. It's an asset stripping operation. It demeans men totally. Family law is just one aspect of the public policy which denigrates men. Their contribution to the household is always denigrated. It's all public policy. I look at young families out there now and think, clearly you people don't read. You know, like they're immune to the government propaganda, which is all anti-nuclear family.
Yes.
And all anti-putting children first in your life, and anti-traditional roles too. So it's amazing that there's anybody out there, and they all look perfectly happy. And, and no, they don't read, and they don't listen to the news, and they don't feel blighted upon.
Right.
You know.
Is it still shocking to you that people would find what you just said shocking?
It's so obvious, it's out there everywhere. You don't have to look very hard to find a broken-hearted bloke.
Yes.
You don't have to look very hard to find people who literally hang themselves in the shed. There used to be a thing called men's lines. I'm not sure what state it is, but this was a kind of sop to the old fatherhood movements. And it... there was one point when it was only answering 20% of its calls, and many of those calls were suicidal. So you're in the middle of hanging yourself in a shed and you'd think you're going to rent, you know, a government-funded phone service like Men's Line.
Yes.
And half the time it's not answering. I forget the exact percentages now, but it was a significant number of calls were going unanswered. That was the level of demand.
Absolutely.
It's very difficult.
Very difficult. I'm seeing it in my line of work. I'm having men reach out to me and tell me their stories around family breakdown, their horrendous journey through the court system, asset stripping, as you mentioned. Guys are ending up just absolutely deconstructed and debilitated, aren't they? And it's not a rare occurrence. And this is what we want viewers and listeners to come to realise. A lot of the men that you might have heard telling these stories, they're telling the truth. It really is this brutal, isn't it?
Well, it's the 50th anniversary of the Family Law Act of Australia, which began, amazingly enough, to take all the heat out of separation.
Right.
And the whole promotion at the time even though he admitted he was against the Judeo-Christian notion of a family, but he was meant to be a caring court.
Yes.
A helping, caring court, and joint custody was to be the norm, and we would arrive at this without all the animus and blaming. And now the government incentivises all of this. It's a massive industry, massive. The whole DV industry in Australia. Dare disagree with them and you'll be in social exile forever and ever, old men. You know, look at Bettina Arndt, one of the few mainstream journalists who has persevered in uncovering this. She's doing well on her Substack thing recently. They've got whistleblower police now coming out saying, you know, there was one case, you know, the guys, they're breaking up or things aren't going any well, and he kicks the watering can on the way out the door to their front gate to get in his car, goes to work, the cops show up and say, well, you can't go home. I go, it's my house. Doesn't matter, mate. And the copper who was leaking the story just says they know perfectly well that guy's life is now totally destroyed. He will lose contact with his children, he will lose his property, he will lose his standing in the community. Men usually let the women network for them, you know, they just get that cop work, get up, go to work, you know, love the kids, love the wife, go to work.
Yeah.
You know, they're not all that complicated, a lot of them, but they literally lose everything.
Yeah.
The suicide rates significantly higher. Youth suicide gets all the money and the attention. It's the divorce age bracket. I can tell you a couple of those sorts of suicide stories, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the best, a lot of this is a river of pain, basically, that is not reported in the mainstream press. It's reported on some of the chat lines, but, you know, they never make it into the broader public consciousness. All you ever get is DV propaganda and women's propaganda, which is vastly outfunded to any male expression of interest in anything, academia or in the bureaucracy. Anyway, so this was well documented and ran on the front page of the Canberra Times, and it was this nice-looking bloke with 4 kids, and he gassed himself in his garage with a child support agency letter in his hand, and they were taking 86% of his wages with, because he was on a high income there, so that's 47%. Then you've got 4 kids, which is another 36%. Then you've got Medicare, and so he was losing, and the agency, and he had no money to live, and the agency claimed they were treating him fairly in the court proceedings. The agency now refuses to attend inquests of child support agency suicides. How utterly disgraceful is that?
Absolutely.
Utterly disgraceful. We ran, I worked for the Australian for many years, and there was a point, the men were claiming that free clients of the child support agency die every day. So with the resources of a newspaper, we set out to demonstrate whether or not that was true. And we had one of the best freedom of information FOI experts in the country at the time, who then went on to work for the ABC. But anyway, he did a fantastic job quizzing the child support agency up and down hill and dale. Their slogan was helping parents manage their responsibility. So we said, right, how many of your clients die each day? And do you think they'd tell us? Would not tell us. Just wouldn't tell us. We don't keep those records. So he says, well, you must keep those records because there's either you're deducting money or if they're dead, you're not deducting money. There must be a record.
Yes.
So FOI'd all that, found that the claim of free a day was an underestimate.
Wow.
And that we don't know what it is now, but it's significant, the suicide rate associated with this scheme, which began under another Labor government, under Bob Hawke, and his most left-wing minister, Brian Howe, who the percentages we have in the child support agency today are almost identical to the ones the Bolsheviks had in Russia a century ago.
Yeah, wow.
It's insane.
Wow.
It doesn't work.
Yes.
It's all to do with the demolition of traditional family role.
Yeah, absolutely. The system is, without question, wildly broken. You started telling us some of the reality of stories that you have been involved with, perhaps written about, reported on, and as you mentioned a few moments ago, 50th anniversary of the Family Law Act, with apparently the right motivation and intention then, but we have strayed so far from any suggestion of a fair intent. Where do we go wrong? What were the factors that have driven us so far off our compass point to be where we are today in the family court system?
Well, it went very wrong very early. Leaving it in the hands of lawyers, of course, was a big mistake. So there was promptly an appeal to the High Court, which meant that the so-called caring court had to operate in a normal legal fashion, adversarial. So that went through very early. You had in Elizabeth Efford a very left-wing Chief Justice, and that tradition of extremely left-wing justices has continued. Yes. These family courts spread all around the world in the 70s and were part of that massive feminist awakening, if you like.
Yes.
Whatever you would want to call it.
Uh-huh.
It just overtook all common sense.
Yes.
We interviewed on, I ran that Dads on the Air radio show for 10 years or co-ran it. And we had all sorts of people like Aaron Pitsey, who founded the first women's refuge in the UK, and Anne Cools from Canada, who opened the first one in Canada, and they both said they never meant these refuges to become an anti-male thing, that there were plenty of, you know, many of the women that showed up were violent. They were just there to help women. That was their role. It wasn't meant to be turned into this multi-billion-dollar industry where we're onslaughts of negative propaganda against males.
Yes.
It's just... Oh, it's sad. How damaging is it for kids growing up with this non-stop?
Absolutely.
We led the way on gender transition. Good old Australian Family Court.
Yes, we did. Yeah, well, there's as you said, there's a lot of damage, and this is the thing that seems to get conveniently lost all the time: the horrendous, unretractable damage to children. Because children don't care about, was it dad's fault, was it mum's fault? They care, our family's been ripped apart, and we are seeing that in increasing numbers. I want to ask you this question, John. What kind of stories do you know to be very common that my average viewer would be shocked to believe is so common? Because we want to raise awareness about the stories of these men. What's commonplace that's going on all the time?
Oh, the one story that really stuck in my brain, and by this stage of my writing on this subject, the Chief Justice was complaining bitterly about my reporting, so the paper had to cite all the documentation. So there was one, and the sister told me the whole story and provided all the documentation, was the bloke, another guy with 4 kids, and lost everything, back living with his sister, very heartbroken, very depressed, lost his job in this whole process, everything. They lose everything. And she said he actually seemed a bit better, so, I went to the shops, and the doctor said the same, that he seemed a bit better, and the child support agency rang while he was out and said, "Oh, we've got good news, you've overpaid $800. And he said, "Oh, good," because he was completely skint, "can I get it back?" And they said, "No, you either have to gift it to us, we'll gift it to her." And he goes out into the back shed, drinks this poison, takes 20 days to die, really painful way to die. And she was just heartbroken by it. And then, of course, they sent a letter asking where his last payment is after he's dead.
Wow.
They're just and refusing to show up for inquests, and it's just disgraceful.
Disgraceful.
I wrote the book at Sue Price's place, Men's Rights. She's in a wheelchair now. I'm 79.
But tell us about your book. I might even just hold it up for people to see. Tell us about the book. Tell us the inspiration, which is obviously what we're talking about today, but give us some backstory on this book. For those who haven't seen it, that's it there. Tell us about this.
Right, well, in 2000, an ex-cop, lots of former policemen in this, and they had a little spot on 2GLF for men's issues, and they wanted to make it about men's issues, and it was a community radio station. And so they, and they'd heard I was a journalist and I was interested in the subject, and so they contacted me, and so I went out to there for almost 10 years, doing all sorts of stories and interviewing. There was a lot of ferment around at the time, Fathers for Justice, climbing bridges and throwing purple dye around Parliament House. And all that sort of stuff was going on. And, there was a lot. So anyway, I did that for 10 years, and it evolved fairly quickly into Dads on the Air, and it was nothing like it anywhere. So we were... we quickly became the longest running because there was a lot of competition. And it's still going in a community sense, but it's not political like it was back then. We were very political.
Yes.
And we just told them what we thought of them.
Yeah.
Just like a family court judgment. No basis in reality.
Yes.
No relation to the evidence.
Wow.
That's what we'd say.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. And just call them. Because anyone who's been through it knows it's a farce. I mean, it's beyond farcical.
Yes.
The family reports are a cesspit of corruption in the Australian judicial system.
Exactly what I'm hearing from men all the time.
It's an absolute cesspit, and everybody knows it. Our overriding point, in a way, was it does the country no good to have this level of disenchanted people who really know the system is rigged against them.
Absolutely.
And it's disgracefully dishonest.
Absolutely.
It's just disgraceful. And these perfectly decent blokes who love their kids are just being torn apart.
Yeah.
And
it is heartbreaking. And you've walked a long road and held a firm line on your view on this subject for an extended period of time. And I'm curious to know your story, John. I know that you've lived in the world of journalism, you've lived in the world of writing and reporting, and you've been inside court hearings and you've had a close-up view. But what about underneath that for you personally? What is the drive? What has caused you to want to continue holding up this standard of truth-telling about this?
I haven't been doing it non-stop. But everyone burns out, like everyone, because it's a ceaseless well of pain, and it's so outrageous, and there's so little, not just little, zero political motivation to fix it. The Labor Party made the Family Law Act considerably worse in 2023 and 2024 by 2 amendment bills, which essentially just inflame the whole DV thing and inflame the percentage that you'll get if you make the claim. And these claims are always made for advantage, not always, but mostly made for advantage in family court proceedings. So I burnt out like everybody else, went overseas in 2010, and it was just, and I wrote a book back then, which was released as an e-book called Chaos at the Crossroads, Family Law Reform in Australia. And that just basically covered that 10-year period, 2000 2010, when there was a lot of ferment. John Howard suggested that he was drawn to the notion of shared parenting. And his ratings went up 4%, if I recall rightly. It was significant. You know, you can bet Dutton would have liked 4%. in this last debacle.
Absolutely.
He had a 12% advantage amongst men. This is Peter Dutton,
Yes.
who followed the opposition leader, and he had a 12% advantage amongst males and made not one single solitary political announcement in favour of men's issues.
Correct.
And he only stood up and parroted the same DV propaganda, the bureaucracy.
Missing in action completely.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And there's a natural constituency you totally ignored.
Exactly, which is crazy.
Crazy. It was
and again, coming back to your personal journey, I mean, you obviously care.
Well, I'm not talking about my own court case or anything like
but
that.
What I'm saying is you obviously care. I can hear that, and I can feel that you care about the men who've been through it. You care about the fact that the system is broken and corrupt. What drives that care?
Oh, it's just so bloody sad. I mean, it's just sad. I mean, I could read a little bit from the last, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I could do it. The last chapter of the book is just me, because I couldn't write this damn thing at home. I spent a whole 10 years of my life doing this, and it was just too intense, and it's too outrageous. You just get outraged, and it consumes you.
Yes.
And that sort of sense of injustice. All the women's groups used to say, where do you get the money from for Dance on the Air? And it was just like, we never had any money. It was just a sense of outrage, you know.
Right.
And a lot of people are just outraged. Some of the stories are so cruel and so unnecessary.
Yes.
And you're just destroying. Australians are doing this to other Australians.
Exactly.
It's utterly insane.
Yes.
And the legislation's just got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, that's right.
Now we're under the what's that new wave? God, I've gone blank, sorry.
That's okay.
Coercive control.
Coercive control, yes.
Now there's a good one.
Yes.
So you don't even have to be in an intimate relationship.
That's right.
And you can accuse someone of coercive control. So if you're a carer for someone in a wheelchair and you keep insisting that they go and have a shower, you haven't had a shower for 5 days, love, and you're getting on the nose, and then they can make a complaint that they're coercively controlling me, they're trying to make me have a shower. And, and a lawyer gets involved, and you can go to jail for 12 years for that.
It's well beyond the point where we're in deep and murky waters on that front, that's for sure.
It's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's totally absurd.
I do want to pick up, though, on something you said there, because it's helpful to the men who will listen to this. You talked about this idea that part of what has kept you in this corridor of this topic and these stories is a sense of missing justice and an ordinary sense of outrage about the cruelty and the unnecessary nature of it. I guess that's something that I want men watching this to pick up on as well, because individually, none of us can fix this issue. But collectively, we can make an increasing noise about it.
It's something of a vanished history. And I found this writing that thing is a lot of there was a really strong fatherhood movement in Australia, much of which has been eradicated from the net. Look up where Lone Fathers is now. There used to be Lone Fathers centres everywhere, and they had a whole lot of political bullshit carry-on about the impacts on men. You try and find it now.
Yes.
There was Dads in Distress.
Yep.
You find it now. Funnily enough, those websites handed up with lawyers, apparently, but it's... Where's the evidence? There was the Shared Parenting Council of Australia, which ran a really strong and interesting campaign. Where have they all gone? You would never know, just because it's been so manicured, that there actually was a really strong fatherhood.
Absolutely.
And this is what defeat looks like.
Yes.
And this is what, and I say at the end of the book, these are all steps towards a totalitarian kind of culture, because you're increasingly dependent on the state. 86% of all new jobs just are government jobs. You're dependent on welfare, many families, and so on and so forth. So that is the population's easy to control. Just cut off their money.
Absolutely. There's no doubt there are so many people who need to extract themselves from this notion of conspiracy theories and come into the light and realise what's going on. And I have this conversation with men all the time through the various platforms I'm on and face-to-face, this idea that there are significant pockets of our society. It's not everybody, but they are significant pockets of the political landscape, the media, obviously, leftist groups, etc. There are pockets of our society that do have a premeditated agenda to diminish and eventually remove the presence of true masculinity from our society. Because with masculinity gone, as you say, an overrun is very easy, and control is a fait accompli if you remove the presence of strong, values-based, character-based men. And so we do need to help people realise that that is going on. There's many men who are realising it, and I'm trying to play a role in advocating for them that to the best that they can, they need to speak up. They need to urge their mates to speak up. They need to become part of a collective voice to speak up about what's going on, because it really is happening, and you've lived that, as we've talked about.
There's so little political will, isn't there?
It seems that
the
way,
Lib
yeah.
Lab Uni Party weren't going to raise the subject in the election. They all had a copy of the book.
Yes.
They could have made it an issue if they'd wanted to.
We hear precious little.
Yeah. And Liberals, supposedly conservative pro-family party, caved on everything.
Yes.
Caved on everything. So, and even that big push for shared parenting back in 2000, he appointed Diana Bryant, who was no friend of, shared care, a great champion of women lawyers, etc. But what do we say? The liars, the lawyers, the bureaucrats and the social engineers have won the day. And yes, they have.
Is there perhaps a story that you remember hearing of a family that still stays with you today and always comes back in your memory?
Oh, there was one poor guy. He was on his way to see his kids. She would only let him see them every now and then, and child support was a nightmare, and the whole thing was a nightmare. And somehow or other, this weekend, he gets to see his kids for the first time in 6 months or 12 months or whatever it was. And so he has an accident with his best mate, and they're all excited to go and see the kids, and he has an accident on the way and is left in a wheelchair, and wifey wouldn't let him see the kids. And years later, he's still... And child support declared that because he'd lost his ability to earn an income, he should pay the entire child support for the entire life of the children up front, thereby leaving him with nothing.
Nothing at all.
So... and never did relent on letting him see the kids after his accident.
Disgraceful.
There's so many other stories.
And you just sit back and you hear that and you just ask why. Like you said before, why are we doing this to ourselves? Why are we actively ripping our own society apart at the seams? Because that's what we're doing. We are coming asunder. And even half intelligent people can see why, but there is this continued drive to keep going in this direction despite the damage. And I think we're yet to see the full brunt of future generations of children who are going to end up twisted and torn and ripped apart on the inside because of what they are being forced to walk through. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, let's just hope none of them out there happily playing in the parks bother to listen to any government propaganda or read or listen to the news or anything, because that's your best path to happiness, is to ignore it all and be happy together and bring up the kids who are scrapping away. And just the government is so ideologically... That family law inquiry they had recently for the 2023 amendments, now they had a woman married to another woman to chair the inquiry, which, when you're dealing with a subject which, has a lot of emotion to it, and we've just been through the whole gay marriage thing and everything, it's just rubbing in people's face, It's just so unnecessary.
Yes.
That, yes, we get that you don't believe in a traditional nuclear family, but a lot of people do, and you have a very
the majority
a strong religious base for it, and it's just... Oh, it's unbelievable, some of the stories. Some of the stories when I was sitting writing this thing was... it's just a litany of these insane things. They've just ripped my kid off me. They claim she was Aboriginal. There's no Aboriginality in the family. Took him 2 or 3 years or something to get the kid back.
It's wild.
Because he'd said to the teacher he thought she was being bullied, so they pick on him as a single dad.
Yeah, right. Shocking.
It's
Absolutely
endless
shocking.
stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the most outraged people are immigrants who just go, I've just come to this country and delivered all my talent sort of thing, because they work hard and they're talented. A lot of them are smart and work hard. And then suddenly they're in this nightmare where they lose everything.
Yes, that never ends, as you say.
Breaks these guys.
From your perspective, what do we want viewers and listeners to be aware of? What can we say to help them come into the light of the reality that this stuff is actually going on all the time?
Well, stay strong, I suppose, inside yourself and help each other, because the state ain't going to help you.
Yes.
They're driving you, and we can see from, recent stuff that they don't care about you.
Yeah.
And so you have to stay strong in yourself and stay strong in a community if you're lucky enough to have one.
Yes.
I think so. And to be aware that this is a major, major issue.
Massive.
And that we're being gaslit constantly about just about every damn thing.
Yes.
And this is one of them. It's not in the best interest of children.
Not at all.
It's not in the best interest of adults.
No.
It's not in the best interest of the society as a whole. And it's a multi-billion-dollar government-funded legal trough.
Yeah. Yeah, the damaging repercussions are multiplying and stacking up without a shadow of a doubt. Look, guys, if you've been watching this episode and hearing these stories and this conversation with John today, and this has been your experience, I would love you to get in the comments below and put your hand up and say, hey, it's true, these stories are real, or maybe you can't tell all of your details, but you might be able to say, hey, we need to listen up to this, we need to get informed. Jump in the comments and tell us some of your story, and make sure you're sharing this episode with other men who you know are going through this journey, because sometimes some guys, what they really need is just to hear that there are people out there who will hear their story and believe their story and not gang up on their story like so many men have experienced. Really hope that you have enjoyed watching this episode, and I'd love to see you on another video real soon. Thanks for joining us today, John. Real pleasure to have you.
No, it's an honour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.